All right. Well, I'd like to officially welcome everyone to our Through Hiking webinar. We have, in representation of OREC and Outdoor Recreation, Hannah Kaiser, who will be presenting for us today. I do want to remind everyone that if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to leave them in the chat box. Hannah, you said you want this to be very casual, conversational, so we can ask the questions during the presentation as you'd like. So yeah, if you have any technical difficulties, please let me know. Send me a private message through the chat and I can help you out with that. So without further ado, Hannah, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so welcome. I'm super excited to meet you all. And let's see, I'll go on to the second slide and we'll go around and do a little bit of introductions. Like I said, I want this to be pretty casual. So if you do have a question ever, you can just unmute yourselves also. And that works great. So to start off, if we want to go around, we can do your name, maybe like what you do at WSU, your major, your job, what outdoor experience you have, or like interest in through hiking, basically why you wanted to come to this awesome webinar. Yeah, to get to know each other a little better, I'll kind of go first. I'm Hannah. I am studying secondary teaching here for my master's, so I'm student teaching this semester. I'm also the grad assistant for the Outdoor Recreation Center. And my outdoor experience, I grew up doing a lot of stuff with my dad outdoors, and then took a break from it for a while. And then when I got back into outdoor activities in my like mid-20s, I was like, wow, I've really been missing out. How do I make up for it? And I was like, I'll just quit my job and hike for 5 months, which is how I ended up doing the PCT. Then I worked as a ranger for a little bit, and work at the Outdoor Rec Center. So that's kind of my outdoor experience. And I love talking to people about through hiking and all things outdoors. All right, so National Scenic Trail sounds like a lot of you are interested in just sort of backpacking shorter distances, but I'm gonna encourage you that if you can backpack 3 or 4 days, you can do it for 5 months also, because that's just the 5 and 6 day trips back after back after back. So in the US, we have several. The one that I'm going to talk about is the one that I've done, which is the Pacific Crest Trail, which starts at the Mexican border and goes all the way to Canada. There's also another one that starts at Mexico to Canada called the Continental Divide Trail. That one is less frequently used. It's a lot more rugged. Arizona Trail goes the length of Arizona. Pacific Northwest Trail goes from Glacier National Park all the way over to Olympic National Park to the ocean. That one's a little bit shorter. And then, so there's some that go around Mount Rainier, or around Mount Hood. So those are, 3 or 4 day trips that are also really awesome. The John Muir Trail is really popular. You may have heard of that. In the High Sierra, the Colorado Trail goes the length of Colorado. So there's a lot of options. There's also a lot of East Coast options. I'm less familiar with those, though I did grow up in Ohio. I did not do a lot of backpacking since I moved here in my teens. And internationally, there's also stuff. So maybe it's winter and you want to get out, go to New Zealand, not this year, but then you can hike the length of those islands. The Te Aurora, the Camino is also pretty popular for people who like to get out and backpack long distances internationally. All right, so what is through hiking? Basically, it's hiking a long trail semi-consistently in a single hiking season, which is normally 4 to 5 months for those trails that were really long, going from Mexico to Canada, and some of the shorter ones maybe take 2 or 3 months. A lot of questions that I get sometimes when I tell people about through hiking is, how do you carry all that food? Well, the answer is that you don't. You are stopping in towns, either hitchhiking or hiking in there and resupplying every 3 to 10 days, depending on like what the topography is. And normally you're hiking pretty big miles, 20 to 30 miles a day, because you've got a short window to hit your destination. So you've got to kind of keep on schedule. If you're doing something a little bit shorter, then it is a bit more approachable. But I know initially looking at 20 to 30 miles, that might be a little bit mind blowing, but your body gets used to it. Just like those of you who are like, oh, I'm a runner. You maybe have thought like, I can't run 5 miles, 10 miles when you began, but your body over time will adapt to that. Once you, like, I started out doing like 10 miles a day. So you don't start out doing 30. That's a recipe for disaster. So the main distinctive differences between maybe just a backpacking trip and a through hiking trip are that it's really lasting many, many months. All right, so are all you familiar somewhat with the annotation tool in Zoom? If you go to the top of your screen, you should see like a little drop down that says more. And then you can, oh no, sorry, a little pencil that says annotate. And then you can pick a stamp. So there's like a heart, a question mark, an X, a check mark. If you want to pick one of those, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to place yourself in where that would be for you. So your comfort zone is like, hey, this is cool. This is normally what I do. I'm happy to do it. Stretch zone is like, all right, I'm kind of a little bit uncomfortable, but like, I think I'm going to grow in this situation. And red zone is like, if I survive this, I'm going to be so grateful, or like it would cause you quite a lot of stress thinking about doing that. So if we've all got our stamps, if you want to put one on where you would be for just like an overnight backpacking trip. And if you're having trouble with the annotate, you can also just pop that into the chat. Oh, we got some. Yeah, so most people feel pretty comfortable with that. Maybe depending on what's going on, right? If it's winter, maybe I'm not super in the comfort zone there. All right, how about like a week-long backpacking trip? I'll clear everybody's. Yeah, red zone. You're thinking, oh man, that backpack is gonna be heavy. How am I gonna wash my clothes? Yeah, I mean, I would agree, regardless of your experience, it's probably definitely going to be a stretch zone because you can't foresee all the things that you're going to have happening. All right, how about if you had to hitchhike into town, if you were on the trail and you need to get food? Yeah, hitchhiking's kind of scary, right? I definitely never did it alone. Yeah, someone's like outside of the red zone. They're like, this is just a death situation for me. Yeah, that's a real fear. How about we'll just do one more. Encountering like a wild animal on the trail, like a bear or.
Have you ever encountered a bear before? That was actually one of my questions.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we talk about animals. But surprisingly few. I only saw, I think, 3, and I mean, I was out for 130 nights or something, so that's like really very few. Sorry, I'm probably toggling a lot of things. I encountered a bear on a hiking trail here in Seattle. Yep, you know what? They can be a lot of places. Also from Ohio, congrats on getting out. I think that is true for everyone. All right. Oh, my stamp is ruining my life. All right, good job. Done with the annotating. Just kind of fun to get you guys involved a little bit. All right, so Pacific Crest Trail, this is one that's close to my heart. It's actually 2,660 miles. That is a long ways. So on the first day, you're like, great, I only have 2,659 miles left. It's a really cool trail because you get to go through 25 different national forests and 7 different national parks. So the topography varies a huge amount on this trail. And here's my first day and last day pictures, which is kind of fun. Trying to keep track of the chat, but it's a little distracting. Usually we have 2 facilitators to manage that stuff. All right, so the first part of the PCT, it's kind of broken up into 4 sections, and that would be the desert. And the desert is the longest one. It's about 700 miles. So you're starting off maybe like the most brutal sort of climate possible, and it's the longest section. Some highlights are trail angels, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are people who dedicate part of their summer or part of their season to helping Pacific Crest Trail hikers. So they like give you rides, bring you food, leave like tangerines on the trail. There's a lot of them in the desert, which is definitely a highlight. Also, the desert is super challenging, so it makes those highs feel really great. That's kind of just a way of rewording a challenge, I guess, in a positive light, but you really feel like you're doing it, and you have that like honeymoon phase of through hiking. And then the sunrises and sunsets are really great, maybe not as great as Pullman's, but they are very awesome in the desert. Challenges: it's super hot. Usually start the PCT in like April or May, and by that time it's already so hot that you can't really hike in the middle of the day. So you're having to like lodge your body under a sagebrush to get a little bit of shade, because also water is scarce and it's not the best quality and it's heavy, so you can't hike through the day, or else it would just be really inefficient. So it's a beautiful section, it's a challenging section. I definitely was really happy when it was over, especially because the section after the desert is arguably the best section, which is the High Sierra, which is also where the John Muir Trail goes through. Has anyone here been to California or hiked in California before? No? We definitely recommend going to the Sierras. They are absolutely incredible. Some of the positives are there's so much water there, which after the desert, you're so happy. It's so clean. It's always cold. It's running across the trail constantly. You're definitely getting a true sort of wilderness experience in that you're not hiking through towns. You're not hiking under inner passes, which sometimes happens on the PCT. In the desert section, like you really feel like you are out there. Some negatives is you're usually reaching this area in June, which is very much still like winter conditions in a lot of places. So you need to carry an ice axe and microspikes. Depending on the snow year, you could have a super different experience. So on the bottom was the year that I did it, absolutely super snow-packed. And I actually flip-flopped. I skipped it because I didn't have the skills necessary, and I felt scared that I might die, to be honest, because there's a lot of high creek crossings and a lot of water, or a lot of ice and snow on the passes. So I came back and did it later, and then you can see in the top picture is like how it looks a few months after that. So that snow really melts super fast. But if you're on a schedule and you have to hit that area at a certain time, so depending on the snow year that you get at the bottom or the top picture. Also, there's no towns for a really long way. So you have to carry like 10 to 13 days of food, and that can be really heavy, especially when you're additionally carrying a bear can. After the Sierra is Northern California, which is really beautiful, but after the Sierra is a little bit of a letdown. So actually a lot of hikers end up quitting at this point. It's really hot. There's lots of bugs. There's huge climbs in and out of town. So usually you'll lose all your elevation, end up in town, and then the next day you're full heavy pack. You have to gain 4,000 feet in 10 miles and full sun, and you're not a happy camper. Let's see. But a lot of the highlights too are that there's volcanoes. You start seeing like Mount Lassen, Mount Shasta, those Cascade volcanoes, which are really beautiful, and you get to see your progress each day as you're hiking towards them. You're also able to hike more miles in a day at this point, so that can be an exciting sense of accomplishment. And there's lots of lakes to swim in, which is always a positive. Then there's Oregon. The whole state is 455 miles, but it goes by super fast because relatively to the other parts of the trail, it's pretty flat. But there's a ton of bugs, still really hot, still really dry, and water is often scarce. So you can see how everyone gets spoiled in the Sierra, and then they go to Oregon and they're like, oh, my life just got way harder. There's also a lot of burns, which means that it's additionally hot and dry. Highlights are you're not in California anymore. You spend so many months in California, you feel like the state will never end. So it's always quite exciting. You can see like the picture as my hiking buddies and I like at the border, and we're very pleased. Crater Lake is a huge plus. It's really beautiful, fun to hike around that lake. And then there's like a really awesome breakfast at Timberline Lodge on the border of Washington and Oregon. So that is definitely a highlight for Oregon. Most people can do Oregon in about 2 weeks. It's like the 2-week challenge, which is kind of neat. And then the last and my personal favorite section, because it's Washington, and you're in the home stretch at this point. Challenges, huge elevation profiles. If you've done much backpacking in Washington, you know what I'm talking about. It gets down to business, like you gain your elevation really quickly. But also September, though not this year quite yet, can be really cold, wet, and snowy. So a lot of times through hikers are like, oh man, it's beginning of September. I have this whole like state left. Am I going to beat winter, basically? But Washington, I think, is one of the most beautiful areas. There's so much awesome swimming. The huckleberries are crazy, but that weather can be pretty temperamental. So the upper picture is in the Goat Rocks. a really beautiful day. And then a couple days later is down below, complete whiteout. I'm told that Mount Rainier is really big and beautiful and close in this photo, but I didn't see it. So some of the other trails, I usually facilitate this with someone who has done the CDT. And this is about a quite more rugged trail, also going from Mexico to Canada through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. And it's 3,100 miles. There's a few more like choose your own adventure in this one. The trail's not complete, so you kind of pick the route that you want to do. The Pacific Northwest Trail, which goes through Olympic National Park, is one that I have my eye on. It's only 1,200 miles, so you probably could do it in about 3 months, which is really exciting. You start at Glacier and kind of just go west. And you get to go through a lot of beautiful and more remote areas. The PCT is pretty busy these days, so this is a nice trail. It also is not complete, so you have a few choose your own adventure, like how you'd like to go around certain areas. The Wonderland Trail, this is a really great like introduction to through hiking as you're just going around Mount Rainier. It's a pretty competitive permit process, but you can also do sections, and I don't know, I think it's really fun to walk around a volcano and see all the different aspects. Also, that national park is just gorgeous. And only 93 miles, it's a little bit more approachable than the 3,000 mile Continental Divide Trail. Tahoe Rim Trail is another really awesome one that goes through the wilderness areas surrounding the lake. The PCT also overlaps with it in one section. I think Lake Aloha, which is that picture there. 165 miles, no permits necessary here. So this is a really fun one that you don't have to get permits for. There's lots of others. Those are just kind of the ones that we chose to sort of highlight. You may have noticed I'm using kind of a lot of lingo because through hikers have their own speak for sure. So we're going to go through some of those fun words, and now you'll be able to speak the talk of a through hiker, and you'll fit in seamlessly. Do you have any questions in the chat? No? Okay. Just let me know if I do, because I'm not really able to toggle all through 3 screens. So trail angels I touched on a little bit. People affiliated with the hiking community who assist hikers by giving rides, trail magic, which is like snacks and things like that, inviting hikers into their homes for food, showers, and medical care. These people are incredible. Like, they have such big hearts. Like, and it's not even necessarily that they hiked the trail. They just like they think what people who hike the trail do is awesome, and they want to support them in their journey. So so the one in the bottom left, this guy like lives out of his van, and he drives it and follows the general cohort of hikers and sets up shade and gives everyone root beer floats through the desert, which it's like, what is better than a root beer float when it's 100 degrees outside and you've been hiking and have no water? Like, that's awesome. Businesses will offer like through hikers like free pie or a free burrito or something like that. The people in the upper left like invite us into their home, and like they were so sweet, and they still send me like Christmas cards. Like, it's kind of crazy the kind of relationships that you build in this kind of very strange community. And then trail magic, that's all the things that trail angels do. There's a picture of me in that root beer float. Rides were all packed in there. They leave like little notes like on the trail sometimes for you, or like, oh, you can come here, just call this number and I'll pick you up and bring you into town so you don't have to hitchhike. So it's really, really sweet. They cache water for you in the desert as well, which is a huge help. Your trail family and your trail name. Your trail family is people who you meet on the trail and you're like, hey, I like hiking with you. Let's hike together forever. I started with a partner, but we ended up splitting up because she wanted to go through the Sierra during the winter conditions because she had a lot more experience than me. But then I found new people who I really like, and now I hike with them every year. So my trail family was mostly just one other woman, but then towards the end, we kind of got a bigger group down in the bottom left. And then in the top part is the next year, we all went on the JMT together. Well, the 2 that I like the most. And then that's another trail family from the Pacific Northwest Trail. So people are like, oh, I can't believe you hiked that trail by yourself. No one hikes it by themselves. They all meet up with different people, and you form like this fun community. hiker hunger and trail legs. After you hire hiking for a few months, maybe like 500-ish miles, you get to the point where you can eat anything, and you can eat it so fast, and then you'll be like, oh, I'm so full, and then maybe 30 minutes later you'll be like, I'm starving again. So it's really fun, kind of expensive, but then also not that great when you have to pack it and eat it when you're out there. So it's only really fun when you're in town. The upper left photo is that lodge I was telling you about, Timberline. They have the best buffet, so that's like definitely a highlight of the trail for me. And then trail legs is when you also start being able to hike more miles. So I started out doing like 10, 12, 13, taking a break. And then as the weeks go on, you start to be able to be like, wow, I just hiked 20 miles and I don't feel too bad. Like, so that starts to become more possible for you. And to go back for a second, trail name, I forgot to touch on this, is kind of a name that your trail family gives you from something quirky that you do. So my trail name was Spatula because I liked to carry this spork that had a spatula on the end so that I could like clean out my pot without like having to drink all the chunks. And they thought that was genius, so they named me Spatula. And your trail family and the people that you meet, you no longer, I'm not Hannah anymore, I'm Spatula. So some people, I don't even know what their real name was. I never knew what their name was because you always just called each other by your trail name. So it's kind of this weird like alter society sort of, I don't know, it's kind of a counterculture thing, I guess. And trail culture, just like I was talking about, pay it forward. So there are a lot of people on the trail and you want that experience to be accessible for people over time. So you always want to try to do your best and be kind to everyone in those towns, especially this year. A lot of people were saying don't through hike this year because of COVID. So that is an example of how you should pay it forward and make those communities like through hikers because of the economic growth that they bring, and not make them dislike us because of spreading a virus, for example. Hike your own hike is like, you know, kind of like live your own life. You might have a different idea of what you want to achieve from the trail. Maybe you want to hike every single step on the trail, and I'm like, hey, this section's boring, so I'm going to skip it. It's like, don't judge other people. They're all out here for your own reasons, and that's just what that be. Hiker trash is another one. It's kind of like this form of pride. Like, yeah, we're pretty trashy. Like we're like sleeping in a porta potty, or I don't know, just like dirty, smelly sort of thing. But even though you do have those characteristics, you still are respectful. And that's kind of the sentiment of hiker trash. And then leave no trace, which we're going to get into, is another trail culture, which when the trails are getting the amount of use that they are these days, you definitely need to practice leave no trace, which is a way of caring for the land to keep it nice for the next people. Do we have any questions about these sort of words or anything? We're good. Sweet. All right, so like I said, LNT, has anyone heard of LNT before or familiar with it? No? Yeah? Good. If you have ever gone backpacking, ideally you should be familiar with leave no trace. It's kind of like knowing, like if you were to travel to a different culture, you'd probably look up the cultural norms so that you weren't doing something like a faux pas or something like that. Leave no trace is sort of a how to take care of the land to be responsible. And some of it's not very intuitive, so it is good to educate yourself, but luckily you came to this seminar or webinar, so you're gonna get that info. There are 7 principles, and we'll go through each of them as they pertain to best practices for long trails. You can see them all here, but I would encourage you, if you haven't heard of it before, to go to lnt.org and check that out afterwards. All right, plan ahead and prepare. So this means basically like you're doing your homework and you're finding out everything that you need to know about the area before you get there, ideally. So the PCT is just a huge planning endeavor. Like I think I started planning 9 months ahead of time for it. You definitely don't need to put that much time into it, but you are planning a lot. You're taking a look at like what gear you need and all of that stuff, like before you even hit the trail. And then once you get to the trail, you're also kind of always planning. So both like the section to section stuff. So when you're thinking about when should I start the trail so that I'm not starting in the dead of winter, but I'm also not starting too late. What's the weather looking like? Do I need to skip a section because there is like tons of snow? The town to town level, like how much food am I going to need? Like, are there any closures? What's the weather look like? If I needed to bail, if someone got hurt, where could I do that? If I'm going to get into this town and I need to pick something up at the post office, is the post office going to be open that day? So lots of planning going on, and also just day to day. Where are the water sources? What is the weather doing? What's the terrain look like? Am I going to be able to make the miles that I think I'm going to be able to make? There's lots of planning. And if you're thinking about doing a long trail, you definitely want to go to whatever organization sort of runs it, because they have very specific permitting processes. So the PCT, for example, only allows 50 people per day to leave from the Mexican border. And 50 people per day for 3 months is a lot of people. There are a ton of people on there. But then, like I said, the Tahoe Rim Trail, there's no permit process. So you definitely want to look into that before you go, so you don't go to the board of the PCT and they're like, oh, you don't have a permit, and so you cannot hike this trail. That would be a huge bummer. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. All of these are so important when you're through hiking, because you are having a huge impact when you are staying outside for over 100 nights on a trail that is very heavily impacted. So making sure when you're selecting your campsite, you're doing a job of making a stealthy one. So a lot of thru hikers are like, I'm so tired, I'm just going to camp right here, right off the side of the trail. Ideally, you shouldn't be able to see someone else's tent from the side of the trail, because you want them to have that nice wilderness experience. And also maybe it's not nice for you because people are looking in at you when you're trying to rest. And then you have less issues with animals if you do that, because animals know where people tend to camp, and so they come in, eat your food, and that's not nice because you're really hungry and you want to eat your food. Avoiding areas that may flood, burn areas, and wind exposed areas. And the PCT in the desert, this is a huge one because there are plenty of burns and windy areas. If you see that top picture, I camped in a wash and it was bone dry, and I was like, this is no problem. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I turned my headlamp on to go to the bathroom, and there was a frog like right next to my face. And I was like, well, that's weird. Then I get up and everything was wet, and I was like, dang it. But I'm also really stubborn sleeper, so I didn't move my setup because I was like, this is probably going to be fine. And it was fine, but it was not the smartest thing that I could have done. So just like being conscious of those things. And then in the desert, avoid camping very close to water. That's the only water for you for many miles. It's also the only water for animals. And if you've got big groups camping around those areas, it can really impact those animals. Avoid making large campsites larger. If you're with your trail family and you can't all fit, don't set your camp up on like a surface that can be disturbed. So like grasses and alpine vegetation are really, really sensitive if you set your tent on them. So being conscious of setting up in areas that are durable. So durable surfaces like rock or mineral soil. Snow is a durable surface. You don't want to be putting it up on vegetation. Don't cut switchbacks. There are a lot of switchbacks on the PCT, and it's like, you know what, if you're hiking from Mexico to Canada, like, what are you're not out here to cut the switchbacks, you're out here for the journey. So just stick on the trail, because otherwise you're contributing to erosion. And they put a lot of work into building those trails. And finally, be a puddle stomper. Don't make those water puddles bigger. You got boots for a reason. You're out here to have an adventure. So no need to tiptoe around those puddles. All right, dispose of waste properly. This is like having been a former ranger. One of my like areas of passion is poop math. All right, so if you go poop 2 times a day and you're out there for 120 days, and there are over 2,000 hikers per season, which there are probably way more now, like 5,000, that is 187 poops per mile, which is 1 poop every 27 feet. If everyone were to go like the same distance off trail before going to the bathroom. So it is very important that you know how to dispose of this waste properly, because this could very quickly become kind of a gross situation for everybody. Which means that you need to be walking plenty far off trail, plenty far from water and from camp. So usually that's like about 80 steps, but also you want to think about the area you're in. So if there's like a nice lake and it's in a bowl and you go to the bathroom here, it's going to wash into the lake. So trying to go to a place where you are thinking about the long-term impact of where you're going. And then all garbage, you want to pack that out. That includes things that you might think are biodegradable, like orange rinds and apple cores. That's not natural to those areas. So you want to be packing those out. And maybe you don't think it's a big deal. Oh, a few pistachio shells. If there are that many hikers thinking that exact same thing, it quickly becomes like a much bigger deal than what is just your personal impact. And then also I pack out all my toilet paper. It's not that gross to do. Just have like an opaque bag and it's no biggie, just because that can get dug up by animals. And you will see what is called like toilet paper gardens, which is just people are going to the bathroom in the same area. They're not burying their waste properly. And there's just like toilet paper everywhere. And it's really gross. That's not why we're out there. We're out there for the wilderness, not for seeing the impacts of lazy humans. And I'm going to just go through this really quickly. If you're wondering what a good setup is for disposing of your waste properly, here's some good ideas. Digging device, wiping device, dirty bag, storage bag. And if you're a lady, urination bandana helps you not get UTIs. This is an area of passion for me, obviously. So yeah, know how to take care of all that stuff. Keeps you healthy, keeps the outdoors beautiful. Rangers will thank you. Oh man, more slides about this. Okay, I think I already touched on this. So sanitize your hands afterwards. That's another good one because you're out for months. You don't get to wash your hands that much and you don't want to give each other diseases. I guess more personal hygiene. I did not carry hand soap or deodorant. I probably would carry hand soap now just because of sort of the culture of washing your hands is different these days. But it's definitely not the same as your normal like hygiene standards. That kind of goes with like the hiker trash culture. Like clean your hands, brush your teeth, keep your body clean enough to prevent blisters and chafe, but you're not, using shampoo, washing your hair, using deodorant, probably not shaving all that often. Like a lot of the guys have like really long beards by the end, which is pretty fun. Foot care is a huge one, especially in the desert. Air out, wash those socks, clean your feet at night because otherwise you get blisters and that can be no bueno. I'd say that foot care is maybe the number one thing that is not attended to enough in the beginning and you have many blisters and much pain. All right, leave what you find, leave only footprints, take only pictures. You may have heard that before. Like I said, with the number of people who are on long trails these days, if everyone wants to take that cool rock, if everybody wants to do some of those things, then they're not going to be there for anybody. Don't vandalize, don't build cairns. You represent a community, and even if you think, oh, maybe they'll think a day hiker did it, everyone blames things on PCT hikers because we are there in such large numbers. So rep your community well. So for example, there was a woman who liked to draw these bears on everything, but you are in a wilderness area, which means you're wanting an experience where you feel like you're the only human that has been there in a very long time. And so when you see something like this, that's like a sign of humanity. And actually, it was a ranger district that I worked on, and I had to go and cut that off the next year. And just that wilderness spirit of we want it to be natural, we want it to be undeveloped, just keeping that in mind. Reduce campfire impacts. This is a huge one. Avoid having a fire. I don't think I ever had a fire the whole time I was on the PCT. And most of the time you're way too busy and way too tired. So it's not really an issue, but you can put this into the chat or unmute yourself. How many gallons do you think it takes to put out like a campfire that's about, I don't know, like your arm's width? $54. Wow, that's a lot. 4. It's more than people think. It's like between 9 and 12. That is probably a lot more than 10. Okay, wow, you guys have like really good idea. Like most people are like a half. It takes a lot of water. And so if you're not somewhere where you have the water to do that, then it's probably irresponsible for you to have a fire. I can't tell you how many times I walked up on someone's hot fire that the wind had picked up and was throwing ashes, and like I was frantically trying to put out that fire before it became a really big problem. And as we know, the West is super dry and that stuff can quickly become really dangerous. And then you could potentially kill people if like that really got out of hand and a whole drainage went up. So it's really important to think about like, yes, it's fun to have a fire. Yes, maybe you're cold, but like, do you need to have this and is it worth the risks? And most of the time that answer is no, especially because the PCT is so hot and so dry, often really windy. And a lot of times because you're hiking in a straight line and you're not just going out into one area like you would on maybe a normal backpacking trip, you might not know what area you're in. You might not know that you've entered an area where there's restrictions on elevation or restrictions at a lake or restrictions in that like national forest or something like that. You might have entered a different area and not really have realized it. So it's always good just to think about these things. And if you do ever have a fire, you just want to make sure that you put it out really good. Stir those ashes, lots of water. A good thing if you are going to have one is carrying like a really big garbage bag, because you can scoop up a ton of water in a bag and then it's not like a heavy thing you have to carry around. It's a ranger tip for you. Respect wildlife, cook away from your camp. There's not grizzly country in the PCT, but the CDT and those other trails have some. This is really good if you get paranoid about animals. You can just find a really beautiful spot, cook your dinner, pack up, and then hike your rest of your way to camp. It's also a good way to kind of break up all those miles. Cleaning up after dinner, drink your gray water. Who knows what gray water is? So it's like, if you get, shouldn't I made like really awesome mac and cheese for dinner in my pot, and then I'm done eating, but now there's like all this cheese sauce like in my pot still, and I need to clean it. So what you should do is bring a spatula, which is my trail name, and scoop all that out, and then you only have to put a little bit of water in and rinse it around, and it's pretty clean. But if you don't have an awesome spatula, then you need to put water in there so that you can clean your pot. But now that water has food chunks on it, and animals probably shouldn't be eating that. And maybe you're in an area that has really sensitive vegetation. So what is best LNT practice is to actually drink it. And so it's called drinking your gray water. And it sounds really nasty, and it kind of is, but that is like a point of pride for you. And if you have the spatula, it's not too bad. If you're really grossed out by that, what some people will do is strain it and disperse it. But I just don't think, I can't see myself doing that in an area where I know there's thousands of other people doing that and thinking about the effects that's going to have on like the aquatic life in the lake, or other animals, or attracting animals to camps and stuff like that. Don't use soap, same thing. Soap is not biodegradable in water. It's only biodegradable in soil. Can you share a link to your backpacking for spatula? Yes, at the end I will do that. And then pack it out, as we talked about before. All right. Food smells and smellable storage. Smell-proof bags can be really nice. They help me feel like animals can't smell stuff. I'm not really sure if they work, but I haven't had any like little rodents chew into stuff. I would say the biggest problem on the trail is not bears, not raccoons, it's rodents, the little guys. Those are going to get you, because if they get into your food, and they will go in and chew holes in everything, and then you can't really safely eat that because rodents pee on like everything. So protecting your food from rodents is the key. You can do that by carrying rodent-proof bags, bear bags, doing like just a little critter hang, not even a full-on bear hang, although if you are in an area where you know there are bears, you should do the full-on bear hang. And sort of the specs for that are 15 feet up and 5 over, but sometimes you're in areas where that's not achievable. So you got to get a little bit creative. But most people are scared about the big animals. Like I said, I saw like 3 bears, but I saw mice, and friends had friends who had mice chew through their tents to get to their food and stuff. And for food, it's also all smellables. So toothpaste, non-scented deodorant, if you did carry that, wet wipes, all that stuff has scent and can attract animals. And then last, respect other visitors, hike or trash, you represent the community. And I feel like all of these have really touched on that. Like you want to preserve it for the next group that's coming through. Also, other things that are not great are noise, playing music, camping near on the trail, and having a sense of entitlement. A lot of thru hikers are like, I'm a thru hiker, which means I mean to be here, and I'm somehow better than other hikers. And that attitude, I just don't tolerate that, because everyone is free to be here, like no one deserves it more than anyone else because of any reason. But that noise and playing music, you just want to be respectful of what other people want from their wilderness experience. And respecting fire closures, restrictions, and COVID restrictions. Like you really should respect those. Those communities are so helpful to hikers during the year, and you want to respect them by doing what's best for them health-wise. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the things I think people are probably really interested about in terms of ThruHiking safety and all of the things that maybe are different than just a regular backpacking trip. Although I think a lot of these do have a lot of good things to say about just general safety. So exposure, snow travel, hitchhiking, river crossings, animals, fires, oh my, all of these things. And we'll have some great pictures and can kind of touch on these a little bit. So in terms of like your own safety, share your itinerary, touch in with your family. A lot of times there is service like in some of these areas, but if there's not, you can get a really cheap, well, not really cheap, really light, somewhat cheap, like GPS device to let people know when you don't have service where you're going to be. Gaia is a great resource also. Also Spot by having the SOS button. Usually those make your family feel better than they, like you maybe you don't feel like you need it, but then your family feels good that you have it. Exposure is basically like the elements. Most people are afraid of like a bear attack, but the truth is exposure is going to be what gets you if something gets you. So hypothermia, heat illness in the desert, lightning, if you're up on a ridge during a lightning storm. So these are the things that are like the silent killers, sort of, I guess. So just making sure that you bring the things that you need to be warm, that you're taking a siesta in the middle of the afternoon if it's too hot, that you know where your water source is going to be. And carrying an extra day of food is always a really great practice. Plus, that last day before town, you can really chow down then if you didn't have to use it. All right, snow travel. I touched on this a bit. Depending on what season and what kind of snow year they had, you might have significant snow travel. So you can check the conditions on different sites. One for the PCT is postholer.com. And then there's certain gear that you probably should be carrying. So sunglasses, sunscreen, microspikes, which is traction on the bottom of your shoes. So that helps you from slipping when the snow is icy. Gaiters, which are a piece of cloth that attaches to your shoe and goes up your leg so you don't get snow in your shoe. And if you know you're going to be hiking somewhere and it's going to be really cold and wet, then neoprene socks can help. But here's two pictures. The bottom one is my friend who went through the Sierra, and as you can see, like she slipped and fell, and then she's using her ice axe to like chop into the snow to keep her from sliding down. And then there's another picture of the guy who also helped me do this one, but you can see like it's really melted out on the bottom. So it's also a hazard because that's a snow bridge. So if he walks over that and it doesn't support his weight, he could fall. So there are a lot of hazards with snow travel. So I really would recommend like familiarizing yourself with that if you do want to go somewhere when it's really snowy, because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know to be aware of. And that can be really dangerous. But also if you have the proper skills and know how to deal with it, it can be a great time to be in the mountains also. Stream crossings, this is probably, along with exposure, one of the most dangerous things because once that snow starts to melt, these creeks can really swell and become like white water and sweep you away, and you have to cross them a lot of times. So some good tips to ask are, do I have to cross at all? Do I have to cross here? Maybe there's a better option up or down the trail, like a mile, up to a mile away. And do I have to cross now? If you cross in the afternoon, the sun has been on that snow all day and the creeks are going to swell. But if you wait till the morning, there's less snow melt up higher. And so those creeks will be a few feet less deep. So sometimes waiting till morning can be a great strategy if you do need to cross a creek. And this mostly happens in the high Sierra. And this was one of the main reasons I decided not to go through at the time that I did, because this creek crossings were extremely engorged. And I think, not to scare you, this rarely happens, but the year that I did it, because it was such a high snow year, 2 people ended up actually dying because they got swept away by creek crossing. So it's something to take seriously. Hitchhiking. So we had a lot of anxiety about this, and rightly so. Hitchhike with other people. That's like the main piece of advice I could give. Know where you're going, find alternates. Like maybe you can hike into town, you just absolutely don't want to hitchhike, then you can definitely do that. Take advantage of family, friends, and trail angels, people that you can trust to a higher degree, and go with your gut. If something feels wrong, have an excuse ready. Oh man, I forgot my camera. Sorry, like I got to go back. Like your safety is really important. And then all of the animals, talk about this a little bit. Prevention is key. Proper food storage protects you and animals. Avoid hiking at dawn or dusk and at night. A lot of people wanted to hike at night because it was less cool, and 100% of those people saw cougars that were like hiking behind them. And to me, that's like the scariest animal I could see. I see some people being like, nope. And that's exactly how I feel too. I was always paranoid about cougars. So don't hike at dawn or dusk. You're in the middle of the night and you should be good, because I barely saw any animals and I didn't really hike at those times. Also, you can sing and whistle while you're hiking, you're talking with somebody, and like that way you're not going to spook any kind of animal. And forest fires, closures, and smoke, just trying to keep up to date. I know it's so hard, like you go out into the wilderness and you don't really want to be connected, but as a PCT hiker, you kind of always are, because you need to know where the water sources are changing, and you need to know what's happening in terms of like weather and fires. But usually they'll have closures posted, so you're not going to be like wandering into a fire unbeknownst to you. And once I started working for the Forest Service, I realized that if they know people are in a closure, they will try to come find you, which made me feel pretty good. A good skill you might pick up if you're thinking about doing something longer is wilderness first aid, because it gives you the skills to know what things to pack to help with like little injuries and stuff like that. Or if you ever did need to evacuate someone, you would know the skills, like how to make sure that if they go into shock, they're not going to deteriorate super quickly. So really recommend OREC usually puts on a course in, I think, May. It's a really a great skill, and it weighs nothing. All right, how are we doing on time? All right, looks good. So now we're talking about some like a little more than nitty gritty. Does anyone want to have any questions about all of the sort of safety and like main fears people have? Hopefully I made you feel better, not worse, and gave you some good tips. All right. So
one moment. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had last minute. So in staying on top of where your water sources are and what's available, what are you using an app? Is there like an updated website that we can print a list out? Like, how do we stay up to date on where these water sources are? I was reading a book and the lady was like, well, this was supposed to be a water source, but it's not anymore apparently. And I was like, okay, so how do we know?
I mean, you always do your best. There's a water report and you can get the most updated version. And you can download it to view offline on your phone, or you could print it off if you wanted. But you need to update it as much as possible. But sometimes it just doesn't get updated, because it only gets updated if a hiker says, oh, hey, like this is dry now. So yeah. I use the water report. That's what I'm referencing. But another option is an app called Guthooks. And Guthooks gives you like where you are on the trail. And then it tells you where good campsites are and like information that hikers leave in comments. So like, don't camp here. Like there's bears walking around all night. So you'd probably see that and be like, all right, yep, not camping there. But then also there will be information on water, like was here last week, was dry, or like one of the times it was like water is in wheelbarrow, but there is a dead lizard floating in it. And I was like, great, this is my water source. I have no choice but to drink dead lizard water. Like, yuck. So the app and then the water report are the two options, but it varies from trail. So for the PCT, those are the two pieces of info, but for the other trails, you could look on the organization website and there would be information. All right. Guthooks. Also, Half Mile is another good app. Talk about this a little bit. For PCT, there is a permit process. It's an online lottery in the fall. Let's see, Half Mile app. Yep. And so we're going to touch on some of these things. I think this is more of like a little bit of a summary slide, but we've got only 5 minutes. So the budget for a thru hike, depending on how much gear you have, is $4,000 to $6,000. Maybe like you have expensive taste. You're like, every time I come to town, I'm staying in a hotel. You're going to be on the upper end of that 6,000 or above it. But maybe you're like, I'm going to stay with Trail Angels. I'm just going to camp really close to town and go in the morning and leave at night, which is what I did. And then it's closer to that $4,000. If you have a lot of your gear already, it's going to be pretty cheap. But you can always find good used and consignment gear also, like on Reddit, on like Ultralight Gear Trade or Gear Trade. Also consignment stores are really great, or like just during the like sale season, you can get a lot of good stuff. You are going to have to buy extra pairs of shoes, usually go through like 4 or 5, and most people don't wear boots for the PCT and those type trails because the trails are really well groomed. They use trail runners, which is nice because those can be a bit cheaper. Food, you're also having to either buy food in town or package it beforehand and send it to yourself. And there's considerable cost associated with that. And then, yep, if you want to eat at restaurants, which you're going to be really hungry, those are other costs to factor in as well. So people think, oh, it's free to thru hike. Usually it's about $1 or $2 per mile. But if you think about it, you'd be paying rent. So like maybe it's worth buying that expensive tent if it's like light in what you want. Different strategy ideas. I did a mixture of sending myself resupplies where I made things at home and sent them to towns that had very little options. So like Crater Lake didn't have a lot of options, so I sent a box there. Stevens Pass also doesn't have a lot of options. Or you can buy as you go if you're entering places. So the trail goes through like South Lake Tahoe, huge town, definitely bought food there. There was lots of options. The best of both is the combination, because maybe you get super tired of eating what you packed and then you have to eat it the rest of the trail. Don't do that. Like you can then like kind of mix it up and get some variety. In terms of food, you want to be packing a lot of calories because you are burning a ton, about 5,000 a day, focusing a lot on that fat and that protein. Sort of my claim to fame was like I gained 3 pounds on the trail, which is unheard of. Most people lose like 20 or more because I really focused on like I want to have lots of protein and lots of fat because I wanted to not be skin and bones by the time I got to the cold parts of the trail. And carrying a stove is the best way. Some people just soak their food in cold water and eat it, or make things you don't have to cook. And I think that would not be a morale booster for me. All right, I'm gonna skip through some of this because I do want to leave time for questions. Yeah, we kind of talked about the water report and touch on gear really quick. Skill and knowledge weigh nothing. So getting those skills like wilderness first aid is really great, and not packing your fears. So maybe you're like, I'm super afraid to be cold, so I'm gonna pack a negative 15-degree sleeping bag. Just do the things that you need, and you don't need to be overkill about it. And so you'll hear this thing called ultralight, and ultralight is kind of about minimalism. Like you wanna have, everything has more than one purpose, and you don't need to have all these extraneous things because really you're out there for the journey, not for all of your possessions. And your back will thank you if you shoot for all of your stuff weighing under 15 pounds. Plus, then you can pack more food, which is always plus. Because usually my pack, I'd say after I was leaving town, was about 35 pounds, which is a decent amount, but a lot of that's food. And then you hike into town and it's a lot lighter at the end. This was something that I did, but I think questions will be better for people. Postural depression, this is a real thing. You had an awesome experience and then you get done. So don't neglect this part of your health. Think about it before you get off trail and what you might do to kind of bring that closure in your journey. And here's some great options: trail work, trail magic, presentations like this one, getting out locally, and all of that good stuff. What questions do you guys have?
Thank you so much. Oh, it looks like Marisol has a question. Do you have any books, websites, or apps that you recommend for planning?
Perfect. That is the next slide. You might just want to screenshot this. I think I can also send the presentation if you put your email in the chat. You can also privately message me it. These are all super great resources. Also, feel free to email me anytime. Like I always offer this up to people, and I'm not just like getting bombarded with y'all's emails all the time. So like people don't take me up on the offer that much, but definitely if you have questions and want to know more about any of this stuff. I think normally this presentation is for 90 minutes. So we did kind of breeze over a few things, but all of those books, Thirst is an amazing one. Becoming Odessa, Thru-Hiking Will Break Your Heart. These are really great books by awesome female authors who hiked the trail and are like fastest known time. They're just incredible people. I love it. Yeah, the trek. Sweet.
Nice. I see some people are putting their emails in the chat. Do you want me to send you the emails, or are you gonna grab?
Oh yeah, you can send me the emails.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? Looks like we don't have any more questions. Oh, Erin says, thank you so much for the presentation, Spatula.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday. And I left Hannah's email in the chat as well if you want to contact her. Thank you so much, Hannah, for presenting for us. And yeah, have a great weekend, everyone.